and restart. Okay, yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moderator, experts, thank you very much for the invitation to come here. Commissioning is a subject of great interest to me, so I feel very privileged to be able to come to talk to the subject today. When I was looking at this stage, I was looking at these buildings, and I was thinking, there's a phrase in English called to judge a book by the cover, that you should not judge a book by the cover. And do you think these buildings are necessarily very good? Probably, yes. Probably, very likely. Oh yes, sorry, yeah. Which, heck, I'll come back to that. Oh man, yes. Okay, do you recognize this building?
Babylon Tower.
Oh, that even look, oh you see, yes, yes. So yeah, sometimes we have great projects and we reach for the skies, but we don't really get off the ground. And maybe sometimes even the more we reach for the skies, the less we get off the ground. And I'm not a technical guy, but it seems to me often when we talk about buildings nowadays, we talk about green, we talk about sustainable, commissioned and platinum and all this stuff. And the whole idea we're trying to sell is that we're going to 120%, where in reality what you're getting is something less than 100%. And I'd prefer, and I think this is why commissioning is so interesting, I'd prefer a situation where we're realistic and we say instead of getting 85%, we're going to try and get, we won't get 100. We're going to try and get 95%. That's an easy 10%. Instead of selling these dreams that we're going to get very hard to get 120%, statistically is impossible anyway. So now to come back to my non-random thoughts. The structure this is great. The structure I want to look today is a bit about de-risking. And I like this word. At the end of this talk, I'll come back to why to some extent, but I'll spoil that all by coming to it now. Here you are all engineers and have a HVAC interest. And we are in this European project that I'll talk about at the end, where we have to talk to financial people. And I met a big bank the other day, and I was saying, oh, we want to solve your problems. And he was saying, I don't have any problem, not at this level. I don't care about energy efficiency. I'm just giving money to investors. This is the bank above the investor. I'm just giving money to the investors. I want two things. I want to see his credit risk, and I want to see his character risk. That's basically what I need to know. And that kind of, all my questions I had prepared about, semi-technical things, they were kind of all, gone. Now, obviously at lower levels, like the investor, which is still very high level, or asset management companies, there's a common language we can find. But it struck me, it was a little bit like this. We got this lovely poster here, and when we're talking about things all around here. And very often behind this thing here you can't see. You can't even see what I'm showing. And finance is up here. And they're the guys who make decisions. So somehow you've got to be able to talk to them. I'll come back to that at the end. Anyway, de-risking. For that point, de-risking is very important. I'm going to talk about Copilot as well, with to some extent, a kind of one-size-fits-all approach to commissioning, to the certification of commissioning. And the reason I say one-size-fits-all is because it's based on a process, and not on granular technical details which have to change for each particular project. That's the expertise of people like you. That's the expertise of the experts. It's not the expertise of a company like us who certifies. I'll talk about full commissioning. I say full commissioning because later on, Eric Melchion will talk about technical monitoring, the certification of that as another thing. I'll talk about the power of the third party. That's when we'll go spiritual. How to become a co-pilot commissioner, and then the finance, as I said at the end. So, de-risking. Yeah, it is a Tower of Babel, and there's a number of little points that are going to pop up here, but maybe to talk to Obaldo's point, the owner, the guy here with the piece of paper. I mean, has anyone looked at his piece of paper? Has anyone asked him for it? And that's to what Emre said earlier, what is commissioning? He said the owner sets some objectives. So imagine a dartboard, like the TTMD, and you want to hit the center. Well, at the end, we're going to see if we hit the center, or if we're near. But how can we do that if we haven't said what the objective is at the beginning? So this is obviously a key point, the owner objectives. Insufficient competence, conflicting trades. You know, you do a good job, I do a good job, someone else does a good job, but our jobs, my good job could actually be undoing your good work. And a whole load of other problems are the reason why commissioning is of interest. Ken Follett, he's just a novelist I like, though he's a bit uneven. Yeah, the most expensive part of building is the mistakes. Now, to some extent, we don't even see this because, sorry, I've just remembered I should slow down for the translation. Because if I am doing a budget in construction, I budget in the mistakes. So I get my 3% margin or my 5% margin, whatever it is, because those mistakes are part of the budget, and they have been for hundreds of years in construction. So, get better buildings. Here I mentioned that the Hackett report, because after the Grenfell Tower, the fire in London, there was this big fire, and the British government commissioned a report, and they said various things like no more auto certification, where like I say that I'm good and you say you're good, and everyone is good, of course. To get trades to work together. What else did they say? I've forgotten what else they said. But the important thing is that the things I'm going to talk about, co-pilot, and the things that Ubaldo mentioned are effectively the things they said that had to be done. Except for they said that in Britain they needed better regulation. And the other thing they said was that the residents needed to be consulted more. But everything else was to do with commissioning. Roles and responsibilities, for example. Who does what? In Ireland, I am Irish, and we're not very good at big projects. We already knew that, but we know it even better now, because we just commissioned this new children's hospital, which is by far the most expensive hospital in the world, which was not at all the aim, not at all the aim. The government had to get in PricewaterhouseCoopers to do an audit, and that was when it was only €500 million over budget, and I think now maybe it's $1 billion. So commissioning isn't necessarily the solution, but it's a big part of the solution. Basically, different contractors and actors on the project, they all did what was said in their contract, but there was no coordination. In France, I mentioned this. It's in Europe. It's a thing that's going to be happening in Europe altogether. But in France, the particular application of this European EU directive is that existing buildings, their final energy consumption has to reduce drastically in the coming, in the coming decades, which is a bit of a pain for owners and an opportunity for us. pragmatic approach to commissioning. So yes, the approach that Copilot took with Reva, because Reva is a shareholder of Copilot, and why did they join Copilot? Because their members around Europe were, I suppose to some extent, being accused of bad work, because non-commissioned buildings don't perform, and who do you blame? If it's a HVAC product, you blame the HVAC guy. I used to be in charge of Panasonic, and they blamed the manufacturer. In every case, more or less, the products were good. They'd just either been badly installed, they'd bought the wrong product, or with the conflict of different trades, maybe someone had changed a dial on the product at some stage and it wasn't working properly. So anyway, Reva got involved with Copilot to try and sanitize the industry and propose experts to us, including from Turkey, Emre here and Junit and Devrim, who are all present. The expert also from Italy, Ubaldo, who just talked, and I should have put India here for feedback. So these experts from around the world gave us their ideas of what commissioning should be, so that we could make a process that we put into our rules of how to certify commissioning. We don't do commissioning. It's just rules of how to certify commissioning. And to summarize this, which isn't that thick, it basically says, set the objective, follow it, and check it. A bit like the slide that Ubaldo showed with the thing going down, like steps going down. The participation, the participation of UBAC as well for the BMS, Building Management System Association, was quite interesting, because sometimes I think the BMS is like a black box that kind of gets put into a building, and we have to just all hope to some extent. We can't necessarily solve that. We can, by commissioning, we can work towards solving it, and having UBAC with us helped us do protocols that can do that. So we got two main things that we look at when we certify. One is what Ubaldo was talking about, full commissioning, and what I will talk about. And the other is just technical monitoring, which later on Eric Melchion will present. The difference, full commissioning, what we want is we want a building that will work. Could be an existing, could be new. We just want to make sure it'll work. So quality is the issue. Technical monitoring, we have a building, and maybe it doesn't work. Could be one of these. So we want to look at the data, following certain protocols and certain pre-identified data, and see, number one, does it work? And if it doesn't, why not? But I won't say any more on that. That'll be presented later. So the full commissioning. The idea that we have is, you might want a good building, you might want well, not a bad building, but you might want a green building, you might want a brown building. Whatever the building you want is, commissioning should be able to follow that. So the way we orient our protocols is to say, at the beginning, define what the owner wants. We don't say what it should be. It's not prescriptive, but it's open. Maybe it's comfort, maybe it's energy efficiency, maybe it's something else. And what we look at how it applies to a building are mainly the technical systems. It's not so much the foundations and so on. It's in particular the HVAC, and the rest of the technical systems. And why particularly the HVAC? Well, because Riva, being a driver, there's a HVAC background, number one, and number two, HVAC is one of the biggest causes of problems in buildings. Or we could say buildings are one of the biggest causes of problems to HVAC, but that might be... So yeah, the building process schematized, and we want to check every stage of that. And we don't want to check it at the end and come and tell you, no, sorry, it was good, you did very well. We want to check it as we go through to say how the project is going. That's what we do, and then the commissioner should be checking it in the different phases, which I could have just been more patient and waited for. So this is actually what I was trying to show. We've taken an approach where the client sets the objectives. I want 50 kilowatt hours per meter squared building per annum, or whatever other objectives he has. And accredited by Copilot, commissioning manager will be on site. That commissioning manager will follow the project live. We will be in communication via our app, and we will do audits at the end of each phase with the aim of, at the end, certifying the building to the client's objectives. I've kind of done the phases in different colors here, but I put in biggest the first bubble, because when we talk about commissioning, people are often talking about here. But really, if you don't get it right here, it's not that it's not worth anything. Of course, it's worth something, yes, but it's not worth even half of what it could be worth, because you're just trying to apply some kind of best practice to a thing that doesn't necessarily correspond to what the owner has asked for. So at the very beginning, we want the roles and the responsibilities to be clarified. We want the contract situation. That's not just a contract with the commissioning manager and the client. The client has in the contracts he has with his contractors clauses saying they should be working properly with the commissioning manager. And then the client's objectives, that they're clear from the beginning. After that, it's going through the various phases of a project. I'll maybe stop at one or two of them that Ubaldo mightn't have mentioned so much. Yes, well, seasonal testing, this is when the building is finished. Everything up to seasonal testing is done by the commissioning manager. But if we have a building in Ankara and another one in Istanbul, there could be two different commissioners. They're both accredited, but they're different. Maybe one is better than the other. We make sure of a minimum level, but maybe there's a difference. Well, when we do the seasonal testing, Copilot does it with our protocols to the data that we require. There can be more than that data, but there's certain data points that we will insist on, and we will check how that goes to kind of give a overall smoothing of the fact that there can be different commissioning managers on different buildings. We also apply a comfort alert, not to know if the people are comfortable. It's more like, 'cause we don't want a building with 1,000 people. We don't want 1,000 replies. We want the 3 people who aren't comfortable. It's an uncomfort alert. We want the 3 people who aren't comfortable to complain. I'm not comfortable in the top floor because, I don't know, the ducting is blowing in too much air every day. So then we know, the technical problem in that building, there's 3 people on the top floor who've been talking about this problem, no one else in the building. You know, if you're sending manpower, which costs on site, we'll send them up there instead of sending them throughout the whole building. As as Ubaldo mentioned, aside from things that are a process, one step after the other, there's some things that throughout the process, they stay live, like training, looking at training. You could have training during construction of the people who are managing the equipment, then training during operation phase of the actual users. How do they adjust the temperature when they're not comfortable? The issues log, very important, systems manual, and so on. And then with TTMD, for example, as we have a standard protocol, we don't say, oh, in each country, this is what you do for the electricity, this is what you do for the HVAC waterproofing or something like that. But if there's particular norms that are critical to commissioning in Turkey, with TTMD, as we got a partnership, they look at what they are to put them into our protocols. On the actual management of meetings, probably the most important thing in the way we approach it is the workshop. We say at the beginning of a project, there should be a series of workshops with the client. The aim of the workshops is to slowly, or more rapidly, arrive at the client's project requirements. He might think he knows them from the start, but in a series of workshops when we kind of orient certain questions that can be asked, we hope that he can sit down, sign off on them. It's not for the commissioner to write them. That's not the job of the commissioner. It's the owner who has to sign, do the paper himself, and sign off. And from there, we think once you got that part done, doesn't mean everything else is easy, but your train has started on the right rails. Meetings are very important. Commissioning is record keeping. I mean, it's one of the most critical things, so obviously records. And to keep owners in the loop. The power of the third-party working method. So the Copilot recipe, we say you may have different technical systems. You may have different phases that are more important to you. You may have different actors on the project that you're more worried about. Well, depending on where the commissioner thinks the commissioner with the client wants to put the stress of the project, he can adjust the depth of testing he does. So, for example, if I'm making microchips in a factory for a computer, I mightn't care if too much if the workers are hot or cold, but I don't want any dust in the air. So I want to be very, very demanding on the air systems and maybe less demanding on the hydronic systems. So our minimum requirement is the documents that you all know that we should have in commissioning. But if we want to be more demanding for the air systems for this microchip manufacturer, we'll ask for other things, like checking that the sign-off of the document was by the person who's been pre-agreed, that he has the competence that was agreed, that the timing of the task was done when it was specified in advance, of course, and that the third-party certification of the task. The third-party certification could be of a person or a process or a product, depending on the phase or activity we're looking at. And this could evolve, but at the moment we said, well, if there's a certain amount of controls per 100 square meters, we'll name it Gold, Copilot Gold, and otherwise it's like commissioning. Gold doesn't really make that much sense because commissioning is, it works or it doesn't work. It's a yes, no. It's kind of binary. You know, platinum commissioning. Like, did you do it? Did you do it? But for marketing reasons, we have gold all the same. We Copilot, then we have to audit at the end of each phase a process. And this is just a list of some of the kind of ways that we will look at the data, take it out. Obviously, we do that in a kind of random way, but these are our rules for ourselves. I won't go through them, but yeah, you get the idea. For each deliverable, there's a way of measuring and testing that it's okay. The way we work with the commissioning manager is via an app, and we basically adapted an off-the-shelf app, because that way it's very rigorous, easy to use, simple document management type of approach, or project management. Whereas when people make their own app, often you find it doesn't work on Chrome, or it doesn't work on Firefox, or it doesn't work when the internet's off. We've avoided those problems by using Trello for our app. And what do we deliver? Well, there's the protocols made by the 3 Turkish experts and people from around the world for us. There's the comfort alert that I mentioned, the technical monitoring that Eric Melchion will present later on, the project audits that we do at the end of each phase, and all that, if everything is okay, leads to certification. The certification can be broken down into the certificate, obviously, and on the website, a list of the buildings that have that are certified, and commissioning managers who are accredited, and quite important, archiving. And the reason I say quite important is buildings change hands over time. Documents get lost. Yeah, so if it's certified by Copilot, you can come back to Copilot and ask for the documents, which if you're going to do a recommissioning or a retrofit or some kind of upgrade, it can be very useful to have access to those documents. For the commissioning manager, what do we look at when we look at for a commissioning manager to accredit? Well, first of all, he's going to be the guy on site, not us. We're not necessarily commissioning experts. He has to be expert. We're not going to make a half expert into an expert. So our aim will be to get people that are already expert and that have already shown experience in managing commissioning projects. So yeah, we can look at his qualifications, the experience, and then we do training. Now, our training, as I mentioned, cannot make a person expert, but it's to make them, the commissioning manager, be able to apply our processes, to know what we look for, to know how to use our app. So it's not a revolutionary training, and also there's part of it that's commercial as well. It's looking at what kind of contracts the commissioning manager should put into place. Some kind of indications on pricing. Now, pricing can change. First of all, when commissioning, what is commissioning? People have different opinions. Second of all, different countries. But we give we haven't yet put it onto our site. We've got a kind of pricing tool saying how much things would cost in days' work. So it can be translated into different countries rather than saying in money. And that can be some kind of baseline if you're quoting for projects to say, well, look, I'm quoting 100, and like it says 110 for this project on the Copilot site. Because obviously the price we put isn't unreasonably high, but it's pricing for proper commissioning, not for, I want to get LEED Platinum and I need to get tick a box. It's not for that, someone calls it garage commissioning.
Cormac, last 15.
Last 15. That was not meant to be there anymore, but start Copilot commissioning. Yes, so at the beginning of a project, first of all, the commissioner should be accredited. Then he's in negotiation with his clients, so he's pricing. And as I mentioned with our tool, we try and help him with the pricing debate. Contracts, we give templates that could help with the whole contract issues. And then what we think is most important, then we ask the commissioner to set up the workshops with the client to start the project. It's not just jump into the project and say, okay, the train is rolling, and it's rolling in which direction? No, it's like, well, can we just take it, the train isn't rolling, where should it be rolling? Where should it be rolling? That's the workshops. This is my last section, and it's coming back to de-risk. What I'm going to talk about here is a European project, EU Horizon 2020 project that Copilot is involved in, and well, yeah, kind of we gathered the consortium together. The project is to study thousands of buildings statistically and a much lesser number in real life, really, and to show how applying certain quality controls can add value to that building. As in, we want to say at the end, if you apply, well, let's say Copilot commissioning, for example, to a building, that building will be worth 5% more. But obviously this is with data behind it. Copilot is a startup. We're not very well placed to be the people for that yet. We don't have the portfolio. But we want to look at buildings that have been built and where you can see their value in different ways, like either they've been sold since, or banks have reissued a loan, or whatever it is, how that varied from one similar type building to another according to what was done. Now, when I'm saying what was done, I'm not saying was it like a Daikin product or a Carrier product, or did they look at this valve or that valve? It's more global quality protocols. It could be they had some kind of checklist they followed through with the building, or it was LEED, or the bank sometimes would insist that a kind of quantity surveyor follows the project, or that there was a commissioner on the project, and to see how that affects the value of the buildings. So then we think for the finance part, asset managers, investors, and so on, the guys who make the decisions, who employ us all here, money employs everyone, like it's at the top of the pyramid. We want to be able to help them manage their risks with a simple kind of statistically defined coefficient. So identify and score the risk profile of investments, translate that risk profile into asset value, and that we'll have a toolkit for that. That's the main aim. And also it will reduce transaction costs, because instead of having to, for example, if I am a financial institution and I want to follow that all myself, well, that takes time. Our idea is a simple coefficient. You've done X. Well, we know in 99% of cases when X was done, there was a 5% asset value increase. So we eliminate the actual study that has to be done. It's a simple mathematical conclusion. So, for example, yeah, quality indicator 1, if it's plus 3%, the risk reduces and asset value goes up 1.2%. And to slot that all up into a asset value formula to get the 1.2%. But not to do that theoretically, to look at real figures as backup. These EU advantages are for the banking community, because I do research with them, so I won't go through them, but we tell them the advantages of them for participating in our research. Us, and it's a 400 billion euro consortium, In fact, it might be the next. I'll come back. Yeah, the consortium is a 400 billion euro portfolio with very big engineering company, European engineering company with Reva, our technical monitoring partner, with the mutual or cooperative insurance companies from around Europe. And we're thinking as well for financial institutions, they're under quite a lot of pressure to show that they're taking quality into account, sustainability and so on. So we build buildings that aren't good, whether they're green or not. If they're not good, they're anti-green. And we think what we're doing with these quality protocols can help banks to tick off things they have to tick off for the UN and for the banking authorities. So that brings me to the very near end, and to maybe go back over the things where we see opportunities in Turkey, or as Turkey is so good internationally in other markets, are for commissioning projects from our point of view, from a certification point of view. And one of the key things, we're working with a German partner who's trying to get the certification into the investors' tender documents. So that means that only contractors who work with him as well can tender for the projects. So those contractors want this to happen, because it's kind of it makes it a kind of a protected environment. Anyway, yeah, commissioning projects. One thing that we're looking at. This is our main goal for Copilot, is commissioning projects. The secondary goal that we've opened up, because we see from the market that it's a real demand, and the reason it's a real demand is because it's a much simpler solution. It doesn't involve being on site. It's just looking at data. Is technical monitoring projects, and there's so many sick buildings out there. Third thing, experts who want to become accredited commissioning managers. And the fourth, if you know asset managers, facility managers, investors who'd be interested in taking part in this Quest project, that would be very useful for us as well. And that is the conclusion. Thank you very much.
Wow. Şimdi hemen hızlıca soru cevaplar bölümüne geçeceğiz. Cormac.